Now, before we start on object creation, we need to understand the basic principle of how Illustrator works, which is how it creates and displays objects or shapes. Every single shape is made up of points and paths. Now, the points usually define the corners or the edges of a shape, while the paths are the vector lines that connect them and form the complete shape, kind of like join the dots, if you like, but with the ability to use curves as well as straight lines between each of those dots, okay? Now, because a shape has an outer edge and an inner area, those can be painted, if you like, by using fills and strokes. So the stroke actually follows the outer edge of the shape only, but the fill paints the entire inner area, which is defined then by the path. Now, sometimes, especially for new users to Illustrator, the basic fill and stroke principle can become confusing, especially when you're creating a path that isn't closed, like a circle is. It's complete, but maybe something like a wiggly line, which has a start and a finish point, but they're not in the same place, because Illustrator, by default, although that's changeable, fills the shape regardless based on the start and the end points which define that shape. So let's take an example of this. What I'm going to do is come over here and just close the layers down so we have a bit more room. And then let's come over to our tools palette and select the pen tool. Now, we're jumping the gun here and going into the tools, but this is something that's definitely worth bearing in mind before we start working on artwork. Go ahead and select the pen tool, and whilst we're here, again, because different shapes have been done and maybe you've been moving around with different colors and documents and testing different things in Illustrator between lessons, it's worth just hitting the D key, which is going to default back to the standard fill and stroke for a new object inside of Illustrator, okay? If you had a brand new document open, this is what you would have by default, but because we've done a few changes here and there, it's worth resetting it. Now, you'll notice both in the color palette in the top right hand side and also down here in the tools, we have a fill of white and a stroke of black. That is the default. Now, like I say, we can change it, okay? Now, in order to see what's going on, we also want to work on a transparent background here in our A4 document. So keyboard shortcut for that is Shift-Command-D or Shift-Control-D on the PC, and that will reveal our transparent background. Let's quickly come up to the document setup and make sure that we come over into the grid size and just change that to small. It'll make it a little less confusing. We can see more detail. If you like, you can also use your keyboard shortcuts to zoom in a little bit on the page. Now, with our tool selected, what we're going to do is somewhere over here on the left-hand side, let's just click and create a point, okay? And you'll see it's highlighted there in red. You've generated your first point in Illustrator. Congratulations. Okay, now let's position our cursor a little further up and maybe into the middle and click once more, and you'll see you've now created a line. So basically what's happened is you've created 2 points, and Illustrator has drawn a path between the two. Now, likewise, if we come somewhere down here on the right-hand side and click once more, you'll see something very different. Not only do we have a triangular line shape, which makes more sense, but we've all of a sudden got this fill in here, which is automatic, okay? Remember, fill white. If the 2 points are sort of at an angle that the path could be closed visually by Illustrator, it will do so, and this is what can become confusing. Now, let's just move our cursor over to the very first point and click again, and what we're essentially doing there is closing the path. We now have a closed path, therefore its fill is set, and the stroke goes all the way around, okay? Now, that's really a sort of a simple concept to understand, but sometimes when you get going in Illustrator to begin with, it can be slightly confusing. So remember here, the points define the paths, okay? And the stroke is sort of hugging the path all the way around, and the fill absolutely fills everything in the middle. Now, with this concept in mind, it's much easier to move forward with shape generation inside of Illustrator.